The air in the great cathedral of Celestia smelled of lilies and divine incense, but to me, it smelled like a trap. I stood at the altar, my silk robes heavy with gold embroidery. Beside me stood Julian, the golden hero of the heavens. He was breathtaking, towering, radiant, with eyes like molten sunlight. He was the man every angel dreamed of, and in the original novel, the real Leo loved him desperately. But I wasn't that Leo. I was a college student who had stayed up until 3 a.m. reading The Fallen Crown only to wake up in the body of the tragic sacrificial lamb. Leo, Julian whispered, his voice like a choir of harps, why are you trembling? Today, we unite the celestial lineages forever. I looked at his perfect, handsome face and felt nothing. Because I knew that in exactly 3 minutes, the sky would turn to ink. Before we continue the story, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next BL story. The stained glass ceiling shattered. Glass rained down like diamonds, and a freezing, oppressive shadow swallowed the golden light of the wedding. The angels drew their swords of light, screaming in panic. Julian. A voice thundered, vibrating in my very marrow. You dare touch what belongs to the abyss. In a swirl of black feathers and violet flames, William appeared. He was everything the book described. The Demon King, a titan of darkness with obsidian horns curving back from his temples and eyes the color of fresh blood. He was terrifying. He was lethal. And he was the most beautiful man I had ever seen. William, stop this madness. Julian roared, his 6 wings unfurling in a blinding flash. Leo is my fiancé. He fears you. William ignored him. His gaze locked onto mine. In the book, Leo had fainted from terror here. But as William stepped through the rubble, his heavy black armor clanking, I didn't look away. My heart wasn't racing from fear, it was racing because I was looking at the villain who loved a boy so much he was willing to burn the world for him. Leo, William breathed, his voice dropping to a rough, desperate plea. I am taking you home. He reached out a clawed hand, his fingers shaking slightly. He expected me to scream. He expected me to hide behind Julian. Instead, I stepped forward. Leo, no. Get back. Julian lunged forward, his sword Aurelius glowing with killing intent. William's expression shifted instantly from longing to pure, demonic rage. He summoned a blade of shadows, ready to tear the cathedral apart to get to me. The 2 titans were seconds away from a clash that would level the city. Stop! I cried out. Both of them froze. The angels and demons in the rafters went silent. I walked past the hero, ignoring Julian's outstretched hand, and stood directly in front of the Demon King. Up close, William was overwhelming. He smelled of cedar, ozone, and ancient sorrow. William, I said softly, my voice steady. You came for me. William's crimson eyes widened. I will not let him have you. Even if I have to chain you to my throne, Leo, you are mine. He spoke the words of a possessive villain, but I saw the flicker of pain in his eyes. He expected me to hate him. He was waiting for the rejection. You don't need chains, I whispered. I reached up and placed my small, pale hand against his cold, armored cheek. The entire room gasped. Julian looked like he'd been struck by lightning. William, I smiled, a genuine, soft smile that hadn't been in the script. Take me away from here. The transition was a blur of shadows and the sensation of falling. When the world settled, we were in the heart of the demon realm. It wasn't the hellscape the angels described, it was a land of eternal twilight, lit by violet moons and glowing flora. William carried me into his private chambers, a room draped in black silks and furs. He set me down on the bed as if I were made of glass, then immediately backed away, his wings twitching nervously. The wedding brand, he muttered, his voice hoarse. I will find a way to break Julian's mark on your soul. You are my husband now, by the laws of the deep. But, he looked away, his jaw tight. I know you loathe me. I will not force you to look at me tonight. He turned to leave, his cape sweeping the floor. William, wait. I stood up, the heavy white wedding silks rustling. Why would I loathe the only person who actually sees me? William froze at the door. He turned slowly, his expression one of confusion and intense yearning. Leo, you were crying when I took you. You called for Julian. That was then, I lied smoothly, moving toward him. In the moment you crashed through that ceiling, I realized something. Julian loves a perfect angel. You love me, even the parts of me that are dark. I reached him and took his large, calloused hands in mine. I'm not scared of you anymore. William shook his head, his voice a broken growl. You are an angel of the light. I am a monster of the dirt. I kidnapped you. I stole you from your home. You saved me from a life of boredom, I countered, leaning in until our chests were almost touching. I could feel the heat radiating from his body. If you want me to be your husband, William, then act like it. His breath hitched. He looked at me with an intensity that would have withered any other angel. Leo, if this is a trick, if you are trying to find a way to kill me, then let me kill you with love, I whispered, pulling his head down. When his lips finally met mine, it wasn't the forced kiss described in the novel. It was a collision of worlds. He kissed me like a starving man finding water, his hands gripping my waist with a desperate, trembling strength. The hero was in the heavens, planning a war to save me. But as the Demon King pulled me closer, marking my neck with his heat, I knew I was exactly where I wanted to be. The Obsidian Palace was no longer a place of gloom. Since I'd moved in, I had decorated the Gothic rafters with fairy lights and replaced the skulls of fallen enemies in the foyer with very tasteful potted ferns. William, the most feared entity in the three realms, was currently sitting on his throne of jagged basalt, looking completely bewildered while I fed him a slice of celestial peach cake. Leo, William rumbled, his crimson eyes tracking my hand. My generals are waiting in the war room. We are discussing the tactical annihilation of the northern border. Eat the peach, Will, I said, poking his cheek. You can't annihilate anything on an empty stomach. It makes you cranky. The Demon King, a man who could level mountains with a flick of his wrist, sighed defeatedly and ate the fruit. It is delicious. But the High Council thinks I have been bewitched by your angelic sorcery. Oh, I'm definitely bewitching you, I winked, leaning against his armored knee. It's called having a personality. They should try it. Suddenly, the heavy iron doors of the throne room swung open. General Malphas, a demon with 4 arms and a very sour disposition, marched in. My king, the scouts report. He stopped, staring at me. I was currently braiding a small silk ribbon into William's obsidian horn. My king, is that a bow? William cleared his throat, looking everywhere but at his general. It is a tactical aerodynamic stabilizer. Report. The hero. Malphas shouted, slamming a fist against his chest. Julian has breached the veil. He has an army of 10,000 seraphim. He's shouting something about cleansing the filth and saving his beloved flower. William's aura exploded. The room darkened, and the floor cracked under the pressure of his power. He dares come here, after I let him live at the cathedral. I stood up, dusting flour off my white robes. He's calling me a flower. Gross. William, get your sword. We have a pest problem. The gates of the demon realm creaked open. Outside, the sky was split in two, one half the swirling purple clouds of the abyss, the other a blinding, obnoxious gold. Julian stood at the front of the heavenly host, glowing so brightly it was actually giving me a headache. He looked like a masterpiece, until he opened his mouth. Leo. Julian's voice echoed like a megaphone choir. Fear not, my sweet, fragile bird. I have come to tear you from the clutches of this shadow beast. Step away from him before his stench stains your purity. I stepped forward, but not away from William. I wrapped my arm firmly around William's waist. Julian. I yelled back. Go home. You're trespassing. The entire Golden Army blinked. Julian stumbled over his own radiant boots. Leo. My love, the trauma has broken your mind. You're touching him. You should be weeping or stabbing him with a hidden dagger. Actually, I shouted, leaning my head on William's shoulder, I'm having a great time. The food is better, the decor is edgier, and William doesn't spend 4 hours a day talking to his own reflection in a holy fountain. William let out a low, dark chuckle that vibrated through my spine. He looked down at me, his eyes burning with a mix of amusement and terrifying pride. You heard my husband, hero, William roared, his wings unfurling to their full, jagged span. The fragile bird prefers the darkness. Julian lost it. With a scream of blasphemy, he dove from the sky, his sword Aurelius trailing a tail of golden fire. Die, demon. Julian lunged. William moved to shield me, but I was faster. I didn't have much holy power compared to them, but I knew the plot. I knew Julian's weakness was his own massive ego. Wait. I held up a hand. Julian skidded to a halt, his sword inches from my face. Leo. You want to deliver the final blow. Yes. Reclaim your honor. No, I said, reaching into my pocket and pulling out a small, enchanted mirror I'd found in the palace treasury. Julian, look. There's a smudge on your forehead. How can you enact divine justice with a smudge? Julian froze. His eyes darted to the mirror. A smudge. Where? My radiance is absolute. He leaned in to check his reflection. While he was distracted by his own beauty, I looked at William and mouthed, now. William didn't miss a beat. He didn't use his sword, he simply used the flat of his hand to swat Julian out of the air like a golden fly. Thwack. The hero of the heavens went tumbling across the ash plains, his armor clattering loudly. The demon army burst into raucous laughter. That, William chuckled, was incredibly petty. I loved it. Julian scrambled up, his hair a mess, his face red with fury. You chose a demon over me. I am the light. I am the prophecy. You're a narcissist in a skirt, Julian, I said, walking toward him until William's shadow loomed over both of us. You never loved Leo. You loved the idea of a pretty trophy to sit beside you on a gold throne. William loves me even when I'm being a brat at 3 in the morning. I would burn the heavens for him, William added, his voice dropping to a dangerous, gravelly tone. He stepped up behind me, his massive hands resting possessively on my shoulders. If you ever call him your flower again, I will rip your wings off and use them as floor mats. Julian looked at the two of us, the demon king and the innocent angel standing hand in hand, looking perfectly synchronized. He looked at his army, who were all whispering about how the captured Leo looked suspiciously well fed and happy. This isn't over. Julian shrieked, his voice cracking. The prophecy says the hero kills the villain. The prophecy also said Leo was supposed to be scared, I shouted back. Updates happen, Julian. Get over it. As Julian retreated in a huff of golden sparkles, the demon soldiers began to cheer. They started chanting my name, not as a captive, but as their queen or king consort. They were still debating the terminology. William turned me around to face him. The war lust was still in his eyes, but it softened the second he looked at me. You stood in front of his sword, William whispered, his fingers tracing the line of my jaw. You could have run to him. He is your kind. He is good. He's a bore, I said, reaching up to fix the ribbon on William's horn. And you're my husband. I don't care about good or evil. I care about who stays when the lights go out. William let out a shaky breath, pulling me into a crushing embrace. He buried his face in the crook of my neck. I thought today you would realize I was the monster he said I am. You are a monster, I laughed, kissing his cheek. But you're my monster. Now, let's go back inside. I think there's more cake, and I want you to tell me more about that burning the heavens thing. That was very hot. William's wings wrapped around us both, shielding us from the world. I meant every word, Leo. Every word. The obsidian palace was bathed in the violet glow of the twin moons. Inside the royal chambers, the air was thick with the scent of crushed jasmine and the heat of a fireplace that roared with enchanted embers. William had discarded his heavy black armor, wearing only a loose silk robe that hung open, revealing the intricate, glowing demonic runes etched into his chest. He looked less like a king of terror and more like a man utterly consumed by the person in his arms. Leo, William murmured, his voice a low, vibrating hum against my skin. His large, clawed hands, usually so destructive, traced the line of my spine with the delicacy of a poet. Every day I wake up and expect to find you gone. I expect to find the real angel who feared my shadow. I pulled him closer, my fingers tangling in his dark, silken hair. I'm not going anywhere, Will. The heavens were cold. You're my sun. Even if it's a black sun. He leaned down, his lips meeting mine in a kiss that tasted of obsession and relief. It was passionate, desperate, and filled with the kind of devotion that could move mountains. That night, we weren't a demon and an angel, we were just two souls finally finding a home. As I fell asleep in his massive arms, I felt invincible. I should have known the plot doesn't like being ignored. The next morning, the suns of the demon realm were obscured by a heavy, unnatural fog. I sat in the sunroom, humming a tune from my old world, waiting for my morning tea. A young servant, her hands trembling so violently the china rattled, placed a silver tray before me. She wouldn't look me in the eye. Your favorite, Lord Leo, she whispered. Honeyed nectar from the whispering woods. Thank you, Mina, I said with a bright smile. I took a long, deep sip. It tasted sweet, too sweet. It had a metallic aftertaste, like copper and lilies. Suddenly, the world tilted. A sharp, searing pain pierced my temples, and my vision fractured into 1,000 shards of gold. Who am I? The memories of my college life, the novel, the transmigration, they began to dissolve like salt in water. The warmth I felt for the man with the obsidian horns started to turn into a cold, prickling fear. Leo. Love, what's wrong? William entered the room, his face shifting from a smile to a mask of pure horror as he saw me clutching my head. He rushed toward me, his hand reaching out. Don't touch me, I screamed, recoiling so hard I fell off the chair. William froze, his hands suspended in midair. Leo. It's me. It's William. I looked at him, and all I saw was a monster. I saw the horns, the claws, the darkness. The love poison, a concentrated essence of Julian's divine manipulation, had overridden my heart. It had restored the original Leo, the one who was promised to the Golden Hero. You kidnapped me, I gasped, tears of terror streaming down my face. You took me from my wedding. You're a demon. Where is Julian? Where is my light? Leo, no. William's voice broke. It was a sound of a heart shattering. Look at me. Remember last night. Remember the garden. You said you loved the darkness. I would never love a beast like you. I spat, the words feeling like poison on my own tongue, though I didn't know why. I scrambled to my feet, my angelic wings, once relaxed and soft, flaring in a frantic, defensive posture. Before William could stop me, I summoned a burst of holy light, blinding him momentarily, and flew through the open balcony, soaring toward the distant, golden horizon of the heavens. The gates of Celestia opened for me like a mother's arms. I crashed onto the marble floors of the great cathedral, sobbing and trembling. Leo, my star, you've returned. Julian stepped forward, looking every bit the savior. He knelt beside me, wrapping his golden cloak around my shivering frame. He smelled of lilies, the same smell as the tea. Julian, I wept, clutching his tunic. He was so terrible. The shadows, the darkness. I thought I would never see the light again. Julian smirked, a dark, triumphant glint in his eyes that I was too drugged to see. He looked up at his generals. You see, the love he had for that beast was nothing but a fever dream. My nectar has brought him back to his true self. I want to stay here, I whispered, my mind feeling foggy and distant, like I was watching my own life through a thick veil. I never want to see the Demon King again. And you won't, Julian cooed, stroking my hair. We shall finish our wedding tomorrow. And then, we shall lead a crusade to wipe that monster from the face of the earth. Back in the demon realm, the palace was silent. The servants hid in the shadows as a terrifying, cold pressure radiated from the throne room. William sat on his throne, his head in his hands. He didn't roar. He didn't break things. He just sat in the dark. My king, General Malphas whispered, kneeling at the base of the stairs. The girl confessed. She was threatened by the hero's spies. It was a love poison. A soul shredder. He doesn't know what he's saying. William looked up. His eyes were no longer blood red, they were a hollow, dead black. He looked at me with disgust, William whispered, his voice devoid of emotion. He looked at me the way everyone else does. Like I am a plague. But he didn't mean it, sire. It was the poison. William stood up. The ground beneath the throne disintegrated into dust. It doesn't matter if he meant it. He is with Julian now. And Julian is touching him. Julian is kissing the lips that belong to me. He reached out and grabbed his massive greatsword, World Ender, which began to scream with black lightning. Malphas, William said, his voice echoing with the power of 1,000 storms. Empty the pits. Arm every shadow. We are not going to save Leo. He looked toward the golden horizon, a terrifying, murderous smile spreading across his face. We are going to burn the heavens until there is nothing left but ash, and then I will carry my husband home over the corpses of the righteous. The sky of the celestial realm, once a pristine, boring gold, was now choked with the black smoke of demonic pyres. The unbreakable, pearlescent gates lay in jagged shards. William was no longer the man who had let me braid ribbons into his horns. He was a god of destruction. Clad in obsidian plate armor that bled shadows, he carved a path through the angelic legions, his greatsword World Ender shrieking as it shattered divine shields like glass. Julian. William's roar shook the very foundations of the great cathedral. Bring him to me, or I will extinguish every star in your firmament. Inside the cathedral, the air was thick with the scent of lilies, the cloying, suffocating smell of the love poison. I stood at the altar, my eyes vacant and shimmering with an artificial golden light. I felt like a puppet, my limbs heavy, my heart beating to a rhythm that wasn't mine. Julian stood beside me, his golden armor polished to a blinding sheen. He looked at the chaos outside the stained glass windows and laughed, a high, manic sound. He came for you, Leo, Julian whispered, tilting my chin up. The beast thinks he can reclaim what is holy. But watch how I break him. Suddenly, the massive doors exploded inward. William stood in the wreckage, his chest heaving, his armor dripping with golden ichor. He stopped dead when he saw us. His crimson eyes, usually so fierce, filled with a raw, agonizing vulnerability. Leo, he breathed, his voice cracking. I'm here. I'm taking you back. Julian didn't draw his sword. Instead, he leaned down. Right there, in front of the man who had burned through an entire realm to get to me, Julian pressed his lips against mine. It was a cold, tasteless kiss, but to William, it was a death blow. No. The scream that left William's throat wasn't human. It was the sound of a soul being ripped in half. The shadows around him exploded, leveling the pews and shattering every window in the hall. I'll kill you, William whispered, his voice trembling with a murderous, sobbing rage. I'll tear your heart out and feed it to the crows, Julian. William lunged. The floor beneath him disintegrated. Julian met him mid-air, his sword Aurelius clashing against World Ender. The shockwave sent the remaining priests flying. Look at him, demon. Julian taunted, parrying a blow that would have split a mountain. He doesn't even recognize you. He thinks you're a monster. He thanked me for saving him from your filthy bed. Shut up. William swung wildly, his technique discarded for pure, raw pain. He's poisoned. You've rotted his mind. Does it matter? Julian kicked William back, his wings unfurling in a display of arrogant power. In his mind, I am his savior. And you're just the villain who kidnapped him. He hates you, William. He told me so himself. William stumbled, his sword dragging on the marble. He looked at me, standing frozen by the altar. Leo, please, look at me. Remember the nights in the palace. Remember the peach cake. Remember that I love you more than my own life. The word, love, hit the poison in my veins like a drop of acid. My head throbbed. A flash of a memory, William's soft smile, a small silk ribbon, flickered in my mind. William. I whispered, my voice small and cracked. Julian saw the light flickering in my eyes. He saw the poison weakening. No, you belong to the light. Julian raised Aurelius, the blade glowing with a lethal, blinding sun fire. He didn't aim for William's armor, he aimed for the gap in his throat. He meant to end it. William, exhausted and blinded by his own tears, didn't move in time. He saw the blade coming and simply closed his eyes, as if welcoming the end of his misery. If he hates me, William whispered to the wind, then I have nothing left to live for. No. My body moved before my mind could catch up. The love poison snapped under the weight of pure, unadulterated terror. I didn't care about the hero. I didn't care about the heavens. I threw myself between them. The sound was sickening. The golden blade of Aurelius, designed to slay the greatest demons, slid deep into my chest, piercing through my white silk robes and out my back. Leo. Julian's voice was a horrified shriek. He pulled the sword out, and I collapsed like a bird with broken wings. William's eyes snapped open. He caught me before I hit the cold marble, his massive arms shaking so hard he could barely hold me. Leo, no. Why did you do it? William screamed, his hands trying to cover the wound, but the golden blood of an angel was already staining his black armor. I coughed, a spray of red gold hitting my chin. The fog in my mind was gone. I looked up at William, really looked at him, and reached up to touch his face. Will, I whispered, my voice fading. I remember. I'm sorry. I said those things. I didn't mean it. Don't speak. Don't you dare leave me. William was sobbing now, the great demon king weeping like a child. I'll give you my soul. I'll give you the abyss. Just stay. You're not a monster, I smiled, a tear rolling down my cheek as the world began to dim. You're my husband. My hand slipped from his cheek, falling limply to the floor. My eyes fluttered shut, and the golden light of my wings began to fade into a dull, cold gray. William let out a sound that wasn't a roar or a cry. It was a hollow, empty silence that was far more terrifying. He looked up at Julian, who was standing there, his sword dripping with his own fiancée's blood. You, William whispered, his aura turning into a black hole that began to swallow the entire cathedral. You killed the only light this world had. The silence in the great cathedral was heavier than the stones themselves. Julian stood frozen, his golden sword clattering to the floor. The hero looked at his hands, stained with the blood of the person he claimed to protect. I was saving him, Julian whispered, his voice cracking with a delusional tremor. He was supposed to be mine. It's your fault, demon. You made him jump. William didn't look at him. He didn't even seem to hear him. He was cradling my cooling body, his forehead pressed against mine. His obsidian horns were chipped, and his regal robes were soaked in my gold-tinted blood. Leo, William whispered, a broken, rhythmic chant. My brave, foolish angel. You weren't supposed to be the shield. You were the treasure. He felt my heartbeat falter, a faint, dying flutter like a moth's wing. Malphas. William roared, his voice echoing through the ruined hall. The four-armed general appeared from the shadows, his face grim. My king, his soul is slipping. The heavenly blade is designed to sever the spirit from the host. There is no healing this. There is one way, William said, his eyes turning a flat, terrifying matte black. Malphas gasped, stepping back. The soul sovereign exchange. No, sire, that is a myth for a reason. You are the pillar of the abyss. If you give up your immortality, the demon realm will lose its sun. You will become mortal. You will age. You will bleed. You will die. I am already dying, William snapped, his gaze never leaving my pale face. Every second his heart stays silent, I am rotting from the inside out. If I cannot be his king, I will be his equal. William laid me out on the shattered altar. He drew a jagged obsidian dagger and sliced his own palm, then pressed it against the gaping wound in my chest. By the blood of the first shadow, William intoned, the floor beginning to shake with a violent, rhythmic thrumming. I trade my eternity for his breath. I trade my throne for his smile. Take my power. Take my divinity. Just give him back. A pillar of violet and black fire erupted from the altar, reaching up to the high, broken ceiling. It swallowed us both. I felt a sudden, violent jolt of heat, like a bolt of lightning hitting my soul. The coldness of the end was forcibly dragged back into the searing warmth of life. My eyes snapped open. I gasped, my lungs burning as they filled with air for the first time in what felt like centuries. The wound in my chest was gone, replaced by a faint, star-shaped scar that pulsed with a soft violet light, William's magic. I sat up, disoriented, the love poison completely burned out of my system by the sheer intensity of the ritual. Will, I croaked. I looked down. William was collapsed on the floor beside the altar. His massive, terrifying wings were gone, shriveled into small, dark scars on his back. His horns were shorter, and his eyes, they weren't glowing anymore. They were a deep, human chestnut brown. He looked older, tired, human. Leo, he whispered, reaching up with a hand that no longer had claws, only trembling fingers. You're breathing. I threw myself off the altar and into his arms, sobbing into his shoulder. What did you do? William, your power. I can't feel your aura anymore. It was a fair trade, he murmured, his voice rough but filled with a peace I'd never heard before. I don't need to be a king to love you. I just need to be alive. This is disgusting. Julian stood at the edge of the crater, his face twisted in a mask of pure, ugly envy. He looked at the human, William, and the scarred Leo. You threw away the crown of the abyss for a broken angel. You're both pathetic. I am still the Golden Hero. I will end this farce once and for all. Julian raised his hand to summon a bolt of divine judgment. But as he began to chant, the light didn't come. His golden armor began to turn a dull, rusted gray. His 6 wings began to shed feathers like a molting bird. What is this? Julian screamed, clawing at his throat. The heavens don't recognize a murderer as a hero, Julian, I said, standing up and shielding William with my own body. My wings flared, no longer pure white, but streaked with the violet of William's sacrifice. You struck down your own fiancé. You broke the divine laws. You aren't the light anymore. You're just a bully in a cape. The floor of the cathedral opened up, not for William, but for Julian. The very ground he stood on rejected him, pulling him down into the gray, cold void of the purgatory between realms. No, I am the hero. I am the... With a final, pathetic wail, Julian vanished into the mists. The war was over. The angels, seeing their hero fallen and their innocent, happy, lowered their weapons. I helped William to his feet. He stumbled, his new mortal body unfamiliar to him. He looked at his hands, then at me, a small, worried smile on his face. I can't fly you back to the palace, Leo, he joked, though his voice was thick with emotion. I might actually have to walk. And I've heard mortals get tired. I laughed through my tears, tucking my head under his chin. Then we'll walk. Or we'll build a house right here in the ruins. I don't care about palaces, Will. I just want the man who chose me over eternity. William kissed the top of my head, his heart beating a steady, mortal rhythm against mine. Then let's go home, Leo. For the first time, let's just be us. The transition from the high, cold spires of Celestia and the jagged, violet peaks of the abyss to the rolling green hills of the human realm was like waking from a fever dream into a soft, golden morning. William, now stripped of his demonic divinity, felt the weight of the world for the first time, the ache in his muscles, the chill of the wind, and the terrifying, beautiful fragility of a mortal heart. But as he held my hand while we crossed the invisible veil into a small, sun-drenched valley, he didn't look back once. Is this it, Leo? He asked, his voice no longer a thunderous roar, but a deep, resonant hum. The place where we grow old. This is it, Will, I promised, leaning my head against his shoulder. No prophecies, no wars. Just us. The first year was a comedy of errors. William, a man who used to summon obsidian castles with a snap of his fingers, had to learn how to swing a mundane iron hammer. I watched from the porch of our small stone cottage as he accidentally crushed a fence post with his lingering, demon strength. I am a failure as a mortal, he grumbled, wiping sweat from his brow, a sensation that still fascinated him. You're doing great, big guy, I laughed, bringing him a jar of cool lemonade. The fence didn't stand a chance. Maybe try being 10% less king of the abyss next time. He pulled me into a kiss that tasted of sunshine and hard work. Our love didn't fade with his power, instead, it grew roots. It became about the quiet things, the way he tucked the blankets around me at night, or how I would sing celestial hymns to soothe his aching back after a day in the fields. Because we were both fallen, one a disgraced angel and the other a mortalized demon, the laws of biology behaved differently for us. Our souls were still intrinsically linked by the soul-sovereign exchange William had performed. One evening, while we sat in the garden watching the fireflies, a strange, warm glow began to emanate from the star-shaped scar on my chest. It pulsed in rhythm with William's heart. Leo, you're glowing, William whispered, his eyes wide with worry. It wasn't a wound. It was a seed. The remnants of our combined divine and demonic energies had coalesced into a new life. Within months, I wasn't just an ex-angel, I was an expectant father. William became a man possessed by protective instincts. He treated me as if I were made of the finest porcelain. He spent his days tilling the earth to provide for us and his nights whispering to my growing belly. You will be kind, he would mutter to my stomach, his large hand resting over the bump. You will have your father's heart and hopefully, none of my temper. In your eyes, I would add, stroking his hair. I want them to have your beautiful, human eyes. Years blurred into a peaceful, rhythmic bliss. In the nearby village, everyone knew of the handsome, silent farmer who grew the sweetest corn and his husband, the ethereal baker whose bread seemed to heal a heavy heart with a single bite. Leo's bakery, the angel's crumb, became the heart of the valley. I spent my mornings kneading dough and my afternoons leaning over the counter, watching the dirt road for the sight of a tall, broad-shouldered man walking home from the fields. William never missed a sunset. He would walk through the door, smelling of earth and hay, and sweep me off my feet, spinning me around until I was breathless with laughter. Still the most beautiful thing in any realm, he'd whisper, his love deepening with every gray hair that began to peek through his dark locks. In the hidden garden behind our cottage, shielded by high stone walls and blooming jasmine, the sounds of childish laughter echoed. Lucius, come back. You're shedding. Lucius, the elder twin by 3 minutes, giggled as he hovered 6 feet off the ground. His small, fluffy white wings, identical to mine, flapped frantically as he tried to escape his brother. Catch me if you can, Kylam. Below him, Kylam scrambled over a pumpkin patch. He didn't have wings to fly, but he had 2 tiny, adorable obsidian nubs protruding from his messy black hair and a spade-tipped tail that wagged with excitement. He let out a playful growl, his eyes flashing a faint, harmless crimson. Dad, Lucius is cheating again, Kylam shouted, looking toward the porch. William stepped out, a basket of freshly picked apples in his arms. He looked at his 2 boys, one a mirror of the heaven he left, one a shadow of the abyss he surrendered, and a look of pure, unadulterated pride filled his face. Lucius, land your vessel before your mother sees you, William called out with a mock sternness, though his eyes were twinkling. I walked out behind him, wiping flour from my apron. I leaned against William's side, and he instinctively wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me into the warmth of his body. We watched our sons play in the dirt, the demon prince and the angelic heir, growing up as simple farm boys in a world that would never know their names. They're perfect, Will, I whispered. William turned to me, kissing my temple with a tenderness that had only grown over the decades. He looked at our home, our children, and the life we had carved out of tragedy. No, William corrected softly, his voice full of a happiness so deep it was holy. We are perfect, finally. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold, the villain and the angel stood together in the tall grass, no longer characters in a book, but authors of their own beautiful, quiet ending. The end. Next. There another story. The last thing I remember was a lukewarm cup of coffee and a final, heartbreaking chapter where the villain, Leo von Astier, died alone in a cold prison cell. No one mourned him. Not the heroine he obsessed over, not the protagonist he fought, and certainly not his parents. Now, I was staring into a gilded vanity mirror at a face that was hauntingly beautiful, cold, and, technically, dead. I had become Liam von Astier. The neglectful, social climbing omega father of a future monster. The mansion was suffocatingly quiet. In the original novel, The Alpha's Thorns, Liam spent every waking hour at balls, spending Julian's money to buy the affection of high society. Meanwhile, Julian, the cold Alpha Duke, found warmth in the beds of mistresses because his home was an icebox. And Leo. Leo was just the heir. A tool. A shadow. I walked down the marble corridor, my heart aching. I remembered a line from the book. Leo learned to stop crying at age 4, because he realized the only thing his parents hated more than him was the noise he made. I stopped at a heavy oak door at the end of the wing. Pushing it open, I saw a tiny, 5-year-old boy sitting on a massive rug, meticulously organizing wooden blocks in silence. Leo, I whispered. The boy flinched. He didn't look up with joy, he looked up with fear. Those big, gray eyes, identical to the man who would eventually burn the world down, were white and trembling. I'm sorry, Father, Leo squeaked, his voice tiny. I'll be quiet. I'll go to my room. My heart didn't just break, it shattered. No, baby, stay. I came to see you. Leo froze. See, me. I knelt on the floor, ignoring the fact that my silk trousers cost more than a small car. Yes, I realized I've been a very silly, very bad father. I missed you. I reached out, and for a second, he pulled back. But then, I pulled him into a hug. He was so small. He smelled like baby powder and loneliness. Who are you? He whispered into my shoulder. I'm your papa, I said, squeezing him. And from now on, I'm not going anywhere. But, the tea party at the Countess's house. Forget the Countess, I huffed. She has bad breath and her tea tastes like boiled grass. I'd rather play with blocks. Leo's jaw dropped. You think so too? The door slammed open. The air in the room suddenly turned heavy, charged with the scent of cedarwood and cold rain. Julian von Astier. He stood there, the picture of alpha perfection, tall, broad-shouldered, and looking at me like I was a particularly disgusting stain on his carpet. Liam, Julian's voice was like gravel. Why aren't you out spending my money? And why are you touching the boy? You usually complain his crying gives you a migraine. I stood up, keeping Leo behind my legs. Things change, Julian. For example, I've decided I like my son more than I like diamonds. Julian's eyebrow arched so high it nearly hit his hairline. Are you ill? Or is this a new tactic to get me to increase your allowance? Actually, I stepped closer, smelling that intoxicating alpha scent. My omega instincts purred, but I suppressed them with a glare. I want you to cancel your meeting tonight. I have a dinner with the Marquis, Julian said coldly. We both know the Marquise's name is Tiffany, and she lives in the South Wing apartments, I countered, crossing my arms. Cancel it. You're having dinner here. With your family. The silence was deafening. Even the maids in the hallway stopped breathing. You're demanding my time. Julian stepped into my personal space, intimidatingly close. We have a contract, Liam. You get the title and the gold, I get my freedom. Don't tell me you've suddenly developed feelings. I haven't developed feelings for you yet, I lied, my heart racing. But I have them for Leo. He needs a father. And since you're the only one available, you'll have to do. Julian looked down at Leo, who was peeking out from behind my legs. For the first time, Julian looked confused. Dinner is at 7, I said, patting Julian's firm, expensive chest. Be there, or I'm selling your favorite vintage wine collection to fund a new playroom. 7 o'clock arrived. Julian actually showed up, looking like he expected a trap. The table, usually miles long, had been rearranged. I had the servants move the chairs so we were huddled at one end. Close. Like a real family. What is this green stuff? Leo asked, poking a broccoli floret. It's a magic tree, I said, popping one in my mouth. It makes you grow into a big, strong alpha who can protect his papa. Leo immediately shoveled 3 into his mouth. Julian watched us, his fork suspended in midair. You're feeding him. Yourself. Where is the nanny? I gave her the night off, I said, wiping a bit of sauce off Leo's chin. By the way, Julian, pass the salt. And stop brooding. You'll get wrinkles, and then I'll have to find a younger, hotter Duke. Julian choked on his wine. What did you just say? You heard me, I winked. I saw a tiny flicker of something in Julian's eyes. It wasn't hatred. It was curiosity. For 5 years, we had been strangers. Tonight, I was a firecracker in his quiet, icy house. Papa, Leo whispered, tugging on my sleeve. Is Daddy staying for dessert too? I looked at Julian. I didn't beg. I just challenged him with my eyes. Julian sighed, loosening his silk tie. The cold Duke was melting, just a fraction. Yes, Leo. I'm staying for dessert. Leo's face lit up with a smile so bright it could have powered a city. It was a smile the villain Leo never had. One day down, I thought. Now I just have to make the most stubborn alpha in the kingdom fall in love with me before the original plot starts. The sun rose over the Astier estate, but for the first time in 5 years, the ice palace didn't feel quite so frozen. I had spent the night squeezed into a race car-shaped bed with Leo because he'd had a nightmare and Papa's hugs smell like vanilla. My back ached, my hair was a bird's nest, and I was currently marching toward the dining hall in a silk robe, determined to drag the Duke of Astier out of his comfort zone and into the real world. Julian was sitting at the head of the table, looking like a Greek god carved from marble. He was reading the morning paper and sipping espresso, perfectly poised. Julian, I announced, slamming my palms onto the mahogany table. Change your clothes. We're going to the royal market. Julian didn't even look up. No, I have a meeting with the Board of Trade. And why are you dressed like a disgruntled cloud? This is a designer robe, you uncultured alpha, I huffed. And the meeting is cancelled. I sent a messenger an hour ago saying you had explosive stomach issues. Julian's espresso cup frozen halfway to his lips. He looked up, his eyes narrowing. You did what? It's for the sake of our son. I grabbed a piece of toast from his plate. Leo has never seen a street performer. He's never eaten a corn dog. He thinks fun is a vocabulary word in a textbook. We are going together. I am a duke, Julian growled, standing up. He towered over me, his scent of cedar and musk turning aggressive. I do not eat corn dogs. And I certainly do not walk among commoners. I stepped into his space, poking his hard chest. Then you're a boring duke. And boring dukes get replaced. Now, go put on something that doesn't scream I own 3 coal mines, or I'll tell Leo you're the one who ate his leftover dessert last night." Julian looked genuinely horrified. "That is blackmail. That," I grinned, "is parenting." An hour later, we were in the bustling heart of the capital. Julian was wearing a simple, linen shirt and trousers, which still cost more than a commoner's house, and a wide-brimmed hat to hide his famous face. He looked like he was expecting to be attacked by germs at any second. Leo, however, was vibrating with excitement. He was holding my hand with his left and Julian's with his right. "Look, Daddy, a man with a monkey." Leo pointed, jumping up and down. Julian looked at the street performer with pure judgment. "That monkey looks like it hasn't paid its taxes." "Oh, hush," I laughed, bumping my shoulder against Julian's. "Look at Leo. He's actually happy." Julian looked down. His expression softened for a split second. Seeing his son's eyes sparkle did more to his cold heart than any of my nagging could. But the peace was short-lived. "Julian, is that you?" A high-pitched, honey-sweet voice sliced through the air. We turned to see a woman in a flamboyant pink dress, clutching a lace parasol. It was Lady Serafina, one of Julian's favorites from the original novel, the one who used to mock Leo for being a quiet little mouse. Serafina sashayed over, ignoring me entirely. She went straight for Julian's arm, her eyes wide with fake innocence. "Duke, I thought you were ill. Your messenger said you were, well, indisposed. What are you doing in this dreadful place?" Julian stiffened, looking awkward. "Serafina, I am with my family." She finally glanced at me, her lip curling. "Oh, Liam, I didn't recognize you without your 5 pounds of makeup and jewelry. Trying the simple look to save your failing marriage." I felt Leo's grip tighten on my hand. The poor kid was shrinking back, remembering how this woman used to talk down to him. "Not on my watch, Barbie." "Serafina, darling." I beamed, stepping forward and physically prying her hand off Julian's arm. "I'd ask how you are, but I can see the Botox is starting to migrate." "It's so brave of you to come out in daylight." Her jaw dropped. "How dare you? Julian, are you going to let him speak to me like that?" Julian looked between us, looking like he'd rather be in a war zone. "Liam, let's just go." "No, no," I said, putting an arm around Julian's waist and pulling him close. I felt him jump at the contact. Serafina was just leaving. She has a very busy schedule of whatever it is Mistress Wannabes do on a Tuesday. We, however, are busy being a happy, cohesive unit. "Mistress Wannabe," she shrieked. "Julian and I have a deep connection." "The only deep connection you have is with his bank account," I retorted. "And that's closed. From now on, Julian's indispositions are reserved strictly for me and Leo." "Right, honey." I looked up at Julian, batting my eyelashes. Julian looked down at me. For a moment, I thought he was going to snap. But then, his hand, large and warm, settled on the small of my back. He pulled me even closer, his scent wrapping around me like a territorial claim. "Liam is right," Julian said, his voice dropping to a low, protective rumble. "I am busy today, Serafina. Please don't interrupt my time with my husband and son again." Serafina turned a shade of purple that matched her parasol and stomped away, her heels clicking angrily on the cobblestones. Leo looked up at us, his eyes wide. "Papa, you were like a superhero. You went bam and she went pout." I laughed, picking him up. "That's right, Leo. Nobody messes with the Astier family." We spent the rest of the afternoon eating greasy food and watching puppet shows. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Julian walked beside us, carrying a sleepy Leo on his shoulder. "You're different," Julian said quietly, his voice devoid of its usual ice. "Different. Good, or different, I'm calling the asylum." I asked. "Different, interesting," Julian admitted. He looked at me, his gaze lingering on my lips for a second too long. "I didn't realize you cared about Leo this much. Or that you could be so fierce." "I told you, Julian. I'm changing the script," I whispered. Just then, Leo let out a little snore against Julian's neck. Julian reached up, adjusting the boy's head gently. "Perhaps," Julian said, his eyes meeting mine with a strange, new intensity, "I should change my script, too. That meeting tonight. I think I'll stay home. We haven't finished that bottle of wine you threatened to sell." I felt a blush creep up my neck. The cold Duke was definitely flirting. Well, I teased, I suppose I can spare a glass. If you're on your best behavior. The peaceful domestic bubble I had carefully constructed was about to pop. While I was busy melting Julian's icy heart with homemade cookies and strategic flirting, the plot was lurking in the shadows, waiting to sink its teeth into my 5-year-old son. In the original novel, Leo met the protagonist, Oliver, in high school. Oliver was the golden alpha, charming, rich, and perfect. Leo was the bitter, neglected villain. They fought over the heroine, and Leo lost everything. But because I had started acting like a real parent, Julian had decided Leo needed socialization. Which meant kindergarten. He looks like a tiny CEO, I whispered, adjusting Leo's miniature blazer. Julian stood beside me, looking equally proud and terrifyingly intense. He is an Astier. He doesn't just attend school, he dominates it. Julian, he's 5. He's there to share crayons, not host a hostile takeover, I sighed, kissing Leo's forehead. Now, Leo, remember, if anyone is mean, you use your words. No biting, no kicking, and definitely no telling them your daddy will buy their house and turn it into a parking lot. Leo nodded solemnly. I'll be a good boy, Papa. 2 hours later, my phone rang. Mr. Von Astier. This is the headmaster. There has been an incident. Please come immediately. And bring the Duke. My heart dropped. Oh no. It's starting. The villain awakening. When Julian and I burst into the office, the sight was not what I expected. There was Leo, sitting perfectly straight on a wooden chair, looking bored. Opposite him was a blond boy wailing at the top of his lungs, a giant purple bruise forming on his shin. That blond boy was Oliver. The protagonist. He called me a mommy's boy. Leo shouted the moment he saw me, his little face flushing red. And he said Papa's hair looks like a bird's nest. I touched my hair instinctively. Rude. So you hit him? I asked, horrified. He tried to take my drawing of our family, Leo said, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and hurt. He said families don't stay together. He said daddies always leave to see aunties. So I tripped him, and then I sat on him. Julian, who had been silent, suddenly let out a sharp, bark-like laugh. You sat on him. Good form, Leo. Julian, I hissed, hitting his arm. I turned to Oliver's mother, a pale woman who looked ready to faint. I am so sorry. Leo is usually. Your son is a monster. She cried. My Oliver is a sensitive soul. He's the future of the kingdom. I looked at Oliver, who was currently sticking his tongue out at Leo when his mother wasn't looking. Sensitive soul, my foot. He's a tiny manipulator. We got Leo home, but the atmosphere was heavy. While Julian was praising Leo's warrior spirit, in the library, I was pacing the kitchen, spiraling. If they're enemies now, at age 5, what happens at age 18? Is Leo destined to be the villain no matter what I do? I walked into the library to find Julian and Leo looking at a map of the world. Julian, can we talk? Privately. Julian saw the look on my face and patted Leo's head. Go wash up for dinner, champ. Once Leo was gone, I collapsed onto the sofa. He's going to become a villain, Julian. I can feel it. He's too aggressive, too protective. Julian sat beside me, his large hand covering mine. He didn't mock me this time. Liam, look at me. I looked up into those deep, dark eyes. In the past, Leo was aggressive because he was lonely. He was fighting for attention, Julian said, his voice low and steady. Today, he fought because he wanted to protect his family. There is a difference between a villain and a man who protects what is his. But he hit the protagonist. I mean, he hit that boy. Julian leaned in, his scent of cedar and warmth enveloping me. If someone spoke about you that way to me, I'd do much worse than trip them. Does that make me a villain? Well, you are a bit of a jerk sometimes, I whispered, my heart fluttering as he leaned closer. A jerk who is hopelessly distracted by his husband, Julian murmured. He reached out, his thumb brushing my lower lip. The tension was electric. For a moment, I forgot about the plot, the protagonist, and the kindergarten brawl. Papa, Daddy, the magic trees are burning. Leo screamed from the dining room. We jumped apart. The kitchen was smelling suspiciously like burnt broccoli. Okay, I said, catching my breath and smoothing my clothes. If he has all this energy, we aren't letting him become a villain. We're putting him into sports and art, and maybe a therapist who specializes in gifted but grumpy children. Julian laughed, a real, genuine sound that made him look 10 years younger. Fine, but if he wants to learn fencing, I'm teaching him. No weapons until he's 7. I yelled, heading for the kitchen. Dinner was a messy affair. Leo was talking about a girl in class named Chloe who liked his drawing, and Julian was actually listening, asking questions about the tactical advantages of the sandbox. I watched them, a lump forming in my throat. The original Liam never saw this. The original Julian never felt this. Leo wasn't a villain yet. He was just a boy who loved his papa. And as long as I was here, I would make sure that even if he and the protagonist were rivals, Leo would be the one with a happy home to come back to. Papa. Leo looked at me, his face covered in spaghetti sauce. Are you sad? No, baby, I said, leaning over to wipe his face. I'm just planning. Tomorrow, we're going to Oliver's house with a giant, I'm sorry, cake. And if he's mean to you again, I sit on him. Leo asked hopefully. No, I glanced at Julian, who gave a thumbs up. I sighed. Okay, fine. Just for 5 seconds. Then you use your words. The I'm sorry cake was a masterpiece of strategic diplomacy. It was a 3-tier chocolate ganache beast that practically screamed, please don't sue us for our son's wrestling moves. Julian, however, was not in a diplomatic mood. He stood by the front door of the luxurious Montgomery estate, adjusting his cufflinks with the grim intensity of a man preparing for a duel. I still don't see why I have to be here, Julian grumbled, his scent spiked with agitation. The boy insulted you, Liam. In my world, that warrants a formal sanction, not a pastry. In the real world, Julian, we have to live with these people for the next 12 years of schooling, I said, shoving the heavy cake box into his arms. Now, look pleasant. Try not to look like you're planning a corporate takeover of their living room. Leo stood between us, wearing a tiny sweater vest and looking deeply suspicious. If Oliver tries to touch my cake, can I at least poke his eye? No poking, I warned. We are here to be the bigger people. Literally and metaphorically. The door opened, and instead of the frantic mother from the day before, we were met by a man who looked like he stepped off the cover of a high-end fitness magazine. Arthur Montgomery, the protagonist's father. He was a prime alpha, radiating a scent of expensive leather and sea salt. Ah, the Von Astiers. Arthur beamed, his eyes instantly locking onto mine. I heard about the little scuffle. Boys will be boys, eh. He stepped forward, ignored Julian entirely, and took my hand, bowing slightly. I'm Arthur. And you must be the famous Liam. The rumors didn't do your beauty justice. I felt a sudden, sharp chill in the air. Julian's arm snapped around my waist, pulling me flush against his side with enough force to make me squeak. Julian Von Astier, my husband growled, his voice vibrating through my spine. And this is my Omega. Arthur chuckled, unfazed. Possessive, aren't we? Come in, come in. Oliver is in the playroom. Leo, why don't you go join him? We've got the latest VR headset. Leo looked at me for permission. I nodded. Go on, baby. Be nice. As the kids disappeared, the adults migrated to the lounge. Arthur was laying it on thick, pouring me a glass of vintage sherry and sitting uncomfortably close on the velvet sofa. So, Liam, Arthur purred, leaning in. I hear you've recently taken a sudden interest in domestic life. A shame. A man with your grace belongs in the spotlight. Or perhaps, in a more appreciative company. Julian's hand, which was resting on my shoulder, tightened. I could practically hear his teeth grinding. My husband is perfectly appreciated, Julian said, his voice like a glacier cracking. In fact, I find his domestic interest to be the most captivating thing about him. Unlike some, I don't need to look outside my home for entertainment. I choked on my sherry. Was that a dig at Arthur's reputation? Or a confession? Is that so? Arthur smirked. Then why the mistresses, Julian? The tabloids say. The tabloids are outdated, I interrupted, placing my hand over Julian's. Julian has been far too busy being a wonderful father and husband to worry about anyone else. Right, darling. Julian looked at me, his eyes burning with a mix of fury at Arthur and something else, something raw and hungry. Precisely. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from upstairs, followed by a scream that definitely didn't sound like playing. We all bolted up the stairs. In the playroom, the golden protagonist, Oliver, was dangling from a chandelier, looking terrified. Below him, Leo was holding a long decorative spear he'd apparently taken off a wall display. He called Papa a social climber again. Leo shouted, pointing the thankfully blunt spear at Oliver. I'm making him apologize from the sky. Leo, put the spear down, I gasped, rushing to grab my miniature warlord. He started it. Oliver wailed from above. He said my dad smells like desperation and cheap cologne. I looked at Julian. Julian looked at the ceiling. A slow, proud smirk spread across my husband's face. Well, Julian mused, the boy has a keen sense of smell. Julian, help him down, I yelled. After a very awkward extraction of a protagonist from a light fixture and a very hurried exit, we left the cake, but I'm pretty sure nobody wanted to eat it after that. We were back in the carriage. Leo was fast asleep, exhausted from his tactical maneuvers. You're not even mad, are you? I whispered to Julian, who was staring out the window with a look of pure satisfaction. He defended your honor, Liam, Julian said, turning to me. The moonlight hit his face, softening the harsh lines of his jaw. And he insulted that peacock, Arthur. I've never been prouder. We're raising a menace, I sighed, leaning my head on Julian's shoulder. We're raising an Astier, he corrected. He reached out, tilting my chin up so I had to look at him. And as for what Arthur said, about me not appreciating you. His face was inches from mine. I could feel the heat radiating from him. I'm a slow learner, Liam, he whispered, his thumb tracing my jawline. But I'm starting to realize that the contract we signed was the biggest mistake of my life. I don't want a partner by law. I want you. My heart did a backflip. Does this mean no more meetings with the Marquise's friends? Julian let out a low, husky laugh and leaned in, his lips brushing mine. There is no one else, Liam. There's just this chaotic, spear-wielding family. And I think I'm finally home. Just as he was about to kiss me properly, Leo shifted in his sleep and kicked Julian right in the shin. Ow, Julian winced. Parenting, I grinned, kissing his cheek instead. It's a contact sport. The school play was a glitter-covered disaster in the making. Leo was playing a sturdy oak tree, which mostly involved him standing still and glaring at Oliver, who, of course, was the prince. I was backstage, frantically sewing a leaf back onto Leo's costume, my mind buzzing with guest lists and summer vacation plans. I was so happy, so dangerously comfortable, that I completely forgot the date. In the original novel, The Alpha's Thorns, this was the week the Ice Duke finally shattered his marriage. A woman named Elena, a cunning Omega who had been Julian's most persistent mistress, was supposed to show up with a medical report and a triumphant smirk. In the book, Liam had shrieked, thrown a vase, and been dragged out of the estate by guards. Papa, you're poking me with the needle, Leo whispered, snapping me back to reality. Sorry, baby. Just thinking, I said, kissing his nose. Thinking about how much you love me and Daddy. Leo asked, his little chest puffed out in his brown tree suit. Always, I promised. As the curtains rose, I stepped into the hallway to get some air. That's when I saw her. She was draped in white silk, looking fragile and ethereal, the polar opposite of my vibrant, sharp-tongued energy. Elena. Behind her stood two reporters she had clearly bribed to witness her brave confrontation. Liam, she said, her voice a practiced tremble. I didn't want to do this here. But the child, the Duke's child, deserves to be acknowledged. My blood turned to ice. The turning point. Elena, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. You're about 5 minutes away from ruining a 5-year-old's play. If you have something to say it to me. Leave the cameras outside. I have nothing to hide. She cried out, loud enough for the parents in the front row to turn their heads. I am pregnant, Liam. Julian's heir, a true child of love, is growing inside me. The hallway went silent. I felt a presence behind me. Julian had stepped out from the auditorium, his face a mask of thunder. What is this noise? Julian's voice dropped like a guillotine. Elena threw herself toward him, clutching his expensive lapels. Julian, tell him about our nights in the South Pavilion. Tell him that you don't love this social climber. Our daughter needs her father. I looked at Julian. In the original book, this was where he looked at Liam with disgust and walked away with Elena. My heart hammered against my ribs. Is the plot a fixed track? Am I just a temporary passenger? Julian didn't look at Elena. He looked at me. He saw the flicker of fear in my eyes, the fear of losing the home I had fought so hard to build. Slowly, Julian pried Elena's hands off him as if they were venomous spiders. The South Pavilion? Julian asked, his voice dangerously calm. I haven't set foot there in 6 months. In fact, I turned it into a storage unit for Leo's old toys last November. Elena blanched. But the night of the Winter Gala. You were drunk, you came to me. On the night of the Winter Gala, Julian stepped toward me, wrapping a possessive arm around my waist. I was in my own bed, nursing a hangover while my husband fed me lemon water and told me I was an idiot alpha for mixing my drinks. There are 20 servants who can swear to it. The reporters started whispering. The medical report in Elena's hand began to shake. Julian, you're lying to protect him. Elena shrieked. You hate him. You told me he was a burden. I did hate him, Julian said, and the honesty hurt for a second. I hated the man he used to be. But the man standing here today. The man who stayed up until 2 a.m. gluing leaves onto a tree costume. He is my life. Julian turned to the reporters, his eyes flashing with alpha authority. If you publish a single word of this woman's delusions, I will buy your agencies and fire you by noon. As for the pregnancy, I've had a vasectomy since Leo was born. I had no intention of letting the Astier bloodline complicate itself further. I nearly fell over. A vasectomy. That wasn't in the book. Wait, I whispered to Julian. You did. I didn't want any more. Accidental, heirs causing power struggles, Julian murmured into my ear. I only want one. And I only want him with you. Elena realized her gamble had failed. She had relied on the old Julian, the cold, distant one who wouldn't care enough to defend his husband. She didn't realize the heart of this house had changed. Security, Julian barked. Escort this woman out, and ensure she is blacklisted from every estate in the province. The drama cleared, but the adrenaline was still pumping through me. We stood in the empty hallway as the sounds of the school play, and Leo's very loud, I am a tree line, echoed from the stage. Liam, Julian said, turning me to face him. He looked nervous. The Duke of Astier was actually nervous. You're not divorcing me, I teased, though my voice wobbled. The mistress is gone. The daughter isn't yours. The plot is officially broken. I don't care about plots, Julian said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a velvet box. Inside wasn't a cold, diamond ring of a business contract. It was a band of gold, engraved with small, delicate leaves, just like Leo's costume. Our first marriage was a contract signed in ink, Julian said, taking my hand. I want to sign a new one. In blood, in heart, in whatever it takes. I want to be your husband because I love you, Liam. Not because of a merger. I looked at the ring, then at the man who had gone from a cold statue to a protective lion. You realize if we stay married, I'm going to keep nagging you about your diet and making you go to parent-teacher meetings. I warned. I count on it, he smiled. I threw my arms around his neck, kissing him deeply just as the auditorium doors opened. Papa, Daddy, did you see me? Leo shouted, sprinting toward us in his brown felt suit, looking like a very happy, very aggressive shrub. I didn't hit anyone. I was the best tree. Julian picked Leo up with one arm and kept the other around me. You were the best tree in the forest, Leo. And we're going to be the best family. The villain was gone. The mistress was defeated. And the villain mother. He was exactly where he was meant to be. 5 years had passed since the tree play incident, and the Astier household had transformed from a cold museum into a chaotic, laughter-filled home. Leo was now 10, a striking young alpha with his father's sharp intellect and my dramatic flair. But as the sun set over the gardens, I felt a familiar prickle of anxiety. I had changed the plot, saved the marriage, and turned a villain into a star student. But there was one thing I could never change, the truth. I kept a leather-bound journal hidden in the false bottom of my jewelry box. It contained everything, the original plot, the character deaths, and the fact that I wasn't the Liam who had given birth to Leo. I was in the kitchen, supervising the Great Pancake War of 2026. Julian was covered in flour, attempting to flip a crepe, while Leo was scientifically measuring the maple syrup. "Papa, I'm going to my room to get my history book," Leo said, wiping a smudge of batter off his nose. "Go ahead, Bug," I laughed, dodging a flying glob of dough from Julian. "And tell your father that crepes are supposed to be thin, not look like rubber floor mats." "I heard that," Julian shouted, grinning as he tried to catch me in a flowery hug. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The playful atmosphere in the kitchen began to cool. "Leo," I called out. "The pancakes are getting cold." No answer. I exchanged a look with Julian. We walked upstairs together, finding Leo's bedroom door ajar. But he wasn't there. He was in our bedroom. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, the secret journal open in his lap. My heart stopped. My lungs felt like they had turned to lead. "Leo," I whispered, my voice trembling. Leo looked up. His gray eyes weren't filled with the usual childhood warmth. They were analytical, ancient, and deeply confused. "It says here," Leo started, his voice cracking, "that in the original story, I kill my father. It says Julian hates me. It says, you aren't you." Julian stepped forward, his face pale. "Leo, give that to me. It's just a story your papa was writing. A fiction." "No, it's not." Leo stood up, holding the book out of reach. "It matches everything. It matches how Papa used to be cold and then suddenly became magic. It matches the names of people we haven't even met yet." He looked at me, his lip trembling. "Are you a ghost? Did you kill the real Papa and take his body?" I felt like I was dying all over again. I dropped to my knees in front of him, ignoring Julian's hand on my shoulder. "Leo, look at me," I said, tears blurring my vision. "I didn't kill anyone. I woke up in this life, and the only thing I knew was that I loved a little boy named Leo so much it hurt. I didn't take your papa away, I became the papa you deserved." The silence in the room was suffocating. Julian looked at the journal, then at me. I expected horror. I expected him to call a priest or kick me out for being an imposter. Instead, Julian knelt down beside me. He took the journal from Leo's shaking hands and, without a second thought, tossed it into the fireplace across the room. We watched the pages curl and blacken in the embers. "I don't care about original stories," Julian said, his voice firm and grounding. "I don't care about real Liams. The man who saved my son, the man who taught me how to be a human being, and the man I fall in love with every single morning is sitting right here." Julian looked at Leo. "Leo, does it matter where he came from? Look at your life. Are you a monster? Are you alone?" Leo looked at his hands, then at me. He lunged forward, nearly knocking me over as he buried his face in my neck, sobbing. "I don't want the other papa," he cried. "I want you. Don't go back to the book. Please don't go back." I held him so tight I thought we'd fuse together. "I'm never going back, Leo. I burned the bridge. I'm staying right here until I'm a grumpy old man and you're a great duke." We sat on the floor of the bedroom for a long time, just holding each other. The pancakes were definitely ruined, but nobody cared. "So," Leo sniffled, wiping his eyes. "In the book, was I really a villain? Like, a cool one? With a cape? You were a very grumpy villain who needed a nap and a hug," I teased, ruffling his hair. "And me?" Julian asked, raising an eyebrow. "Was I at least a handsome duke?" "You were a colossal jerk who wore too much cologne and never smiled," I retorted. Julian laughed, pulling us both into his lap. "Well, thank God for transmigration, then. I prefer this version of the script." But then, Leo squinted at the fireplace where the last of the pages were turning to ash. "Wait, if I know the future now, does that mean I can make sure Oliver never wins the school science fair?" I groaned, burying my face in my hands. "Julian, we've created a monster. A well-loved, emotionally stable, tactical monster. He's an Astier," Julian said proudly, kissing the top of my head. "The protagonist doesn't stand a chance." As we walked back down to dinner, I realized the plot wasn't just broken, it was gone. We weren't characters anymore. We were just a family, writing our own ending, one burnt pancake at a time. 8 years later, the Astier Duchy was no longer known as the Ice Palace. It was now the Garden of the Capital, famous for its sprawling rosebushes and the sound of laughter that frequently drifted over the stone walls. I stood before the same gilded vanity mirror where this journey had begun. But the face staring back wasn't cold or hollow anymore. There were tiny crinkles at the corners of my eyes from laughing at Julian's terrible jokes, and my skin glowed with the kind of peace no skincare routine could buy. Today was the day. Our second wedding. No contracts. No business mergers. Just us. A knock at the door startled me. "Papa, are you crying?" "Because if you are, Daddy says he's going to fire the florist for making the bouquet too emotional." I laughed, wiping a stray tear. "Come in, Leo." The door swung open to reveal a 15-year-old alpha who was already nearly as tall as Julian. Leo was breathtaking, sharp jawline, silver gray eyes, and a confident smirk that usually meant he'd just outsmarted someone. In the original novel, this was the year Leo was supposed to be expelled for a violent brawl over the heroine. In this world, I just saw Clara, the girl from the neighboring estate, Leo said, leaning against the doorframe in his charcoal gray suit. "The one you said was the heroine in your old journal." My heart skipped a beat. And she's nice," Leo shrugged. "But she's obsessed with Oliver. They're currently arguing in the garden about who has the better grade in advanced calculus. Honestly, Papa, they deserve each other. They're both exhausting." I let out a breath I'd been holding for a decade. The obsession was gone. Leo didn't want the heroine, he wanted to win the national fencing championship and eventually take over the duchy to improve the social welfare programs. "You're not jealous?" I asked. Leo walked over and straightened my silk cravat. "Why would I be jealous of a golden boy when I have the coolest parents in the kingdom? Besides, I have a date with that cute Omega scholar from the library. He thinks my tactical theories are revolutionary." I beamed. My son was a nerd. A popular, athletic, slightly terrifying nerd. Mission accomplished. The vows. The ceremony was held in the private gardens. Julian was waiting for me at the altar, looking like the ultimate alpha, strong, steady, and looking at me like I was the only person in the world. As I walked down the aisle, I saw the faces of the people we'd changed. Arthur Montgomery was there, no longer flirting with me but nodding respectfully to Julian. Even the old, gossipy duchesses were wiping their eyes. Julian took my hands. His palms were sweaty. The Duke of Astier was nervous. "Liam," Julian began, his voice thick with emotion. 13 years ago, I married a stranger. 5 years after that, I met a man who challenged me, provoked me, and eventually, saved me. You didn't just give me a son, you gave me a soul. I don't know where you came from before you walked into that nursery, but I thank every star in the sky that you stayed." I choked back a sob. "Julian, I came here thinking I had to save Leo. I didn't realize I was the one who needed saving. You made this world real for me. You turned a story into a life. I love you," we whispered in unison. The reception was a blur of music and dancing. Leo was currently leading a group of teenagers in a high-stakes game of tactical hide-and-seek across the estate, while Oliver and Clara were indeed sitting in a corner together, discussing math. Julian pulled me away from the crowd, leading me to the balcony of the South Pavilion, the place that used to be a symbol of his distance, now a sunlit library. "What are you thinking about?" Julian asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind and resting his chin on my shoulder. "Just thinking about the ending," I murmured, leaning back into his warmth. "In the book, the story ended with a funeral. Here, it feels like it's only the beginning." "It is," Julian said, kissing my neck. "Leo is happy. The duchy is thriving. And I have a husband who still thinks he can boss me around." "I can boss you around," I corrected, turning in his arms to grin at him. "I'm the one who changed fate, remember?" Julian laughed, that deep, rich sound that always made my heart flutter. "Then lead the way, my love. Where does the story go from here?" I looked out over the gardens, at our son laughing with his friends, at the lights of the city sparkling in the distance, and at the man holding me like I was the most precious thing in existence. "From here," I whispered, pulling him down for a kiss. "We live happily ever after. And this time, it's not just a fairy tale. It's ours." The end.